Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. Today we have on genius Aryan Geravesh. He is a financial wizard. He helps with the Keller Williams program here and is joining us today to talk about personal finance.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited, guys.
We're pumped.
Yeah.
Yes.
Aryan, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, absolutely. My God, I used to be in the insurance industry and selling insurance. I love sales. And before that, I was a musician and I was doing music as a full-time job, traveling
Really?
all around the world. And music was my passion. And then I decided to get a full-time job and just start selling and building my portfolio. And that's how I started with. And then I've noticed that I like numbers better than sales. Even sales is my passion. I love to sell, but number was more exciting for me.
Really?
Yes. And then I went back to college and to get my degree, and now I'm working here at Keller Williams, and I manage the financial for the company. Super excited here.
Wow.
Awesome. So how do you wake up one morning from, being in the music industry, traveling the world, and then just go, hey, I just want to jump into finance and do all this number stuff? How does that happen?
What were you playing, by the way? What instrument?
Piano, guitar, those are my,
Really?
mainly piano is my instrument, but well, to answer to your question, I think I was broke so many times and I got frustrated. That was one reason. But truly, I got to the point that I had to think about the business. And at the same time, I've noticed I was kind of like burned and I couldn't travel. And at the same time, I couldn't perform as much as I thought I can. I think I lost energy. That was one of the reasons. And also music was, I still love music, but the biggest challenge that I have, you never know what you're gonna get, like as far as the shows, and
Right.
there are so many different things behind the scene, and it was hard to make it. And at the same time, I always enjoyed financials, and from long time ago, I was kind of like thought about having accounting and going after the accounting, understanding financials, and that's how I
Really?
started it. Yeah.
And so you went from performing as a musician to performing as a salesperson.
Yes.
And you have told us in the past you did really well in the insurance sales. Kind of what were you selling?
Any type of product, from business, workers' comp, all type of insurances, all personal line, and so on. And I had to choose what product I really like to sell, but mainly business was my main niche.
So business insurance was what you were doing well in.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. And I know we brought you on today to talk a little bit about personal finance, right? Because we've got a lot of younger listeners. We know financial health and financial literacy is super important.
True.
You've been a good guide for both of us getting through
Absolutely.
stuff since we've moved
Thank
here.
you.
Was there a defining moment or time for you where you realized or something clicked where you really knew how important it is to understand personal finance and how money works?
Absolutely. I always listen to all the top CEOs, CFOs, and so on. I'm going to be really honest here. So I got to the point that I am just paycheck to paycheck. I'm not making money, and I'm always behind, and my credit card is going up. And I got to the point I was like, hey, you need to make some changes. And I believe it's never late to make those changes. I believe if anyone in the entire world, like you sit down by yourself, and I believe, for example, I can be really honest with myself because I put everything on a paper and I'm like, okay, I'm not making as much as I'm spending. That was my first thing. And I was like, okay, I have to change jobs, or I have to work more hours, or I have to have a couple jobs. And for a long time I had a couple jobs, even when I was in music. I had to be in different positions and different jobs, such as being in a restaurant or any other jobs to just be able to collect more money. And then based on my planning, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pay off as much as credit card that I have, and I'm gonna have a strategy. And it was really hard to make myself really disciplined and focus on that, but I am so happy that I was able to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you hit kind of a hard place, or you were in a harder place for a while as a musician,
Yes.
and that's what really changed your direction?
Absolutely. That was the main goal. Yeah.
Gotcha. And when working, or when you see kind of younger people like ourselves, is there, what's the best way for people like us or younger people to get started? What's the one thing that they should know about personal finances when they're starting to earn money, or they're in a tough spot like that? What's the first change or the first mindset shift that they need to make?
Absolutely. What I've seen in people, like I have nephew, niece, friends, all the younger age, the biggest challenge that I have is, unfortunately, in school even, they don't teach you a great or easier way to keep track of your expense. And I think the best way is to go over your need analysis and see how much money you need a month and what you exactly want to do. I think if anyone have that, they can build a discipline or a strategy to achieve their goal. I would always recommend to start with budgeting and see how much money you need to make in a month. And some people, they don't want to invest. Some people, they want to just be paycheck and have little savings account, which is okay too. But having a little strategy where you want to go, how you want to do it, and understanding your potential, that's the key for your business or your personal life.
So budgeting is going to be the first step.
Absolutely.
And you had already mentioned that you had the mind shift change of you need to make more than you're spending.
Absolutely.
Or, conversely, you need to spend less than you're making, right?
Yes.
When you're doing your budgeting, what are you looking at? I think you mentioned a needs chart. Is that what you said? Can you go through? Yeah.
What is that analysis?
Sure.
Yeah.
The need analysis. Need analysis is pretty much, I always, for example, myself, I pay attention to my financials, and I was like, okay, if I make $1,000, will that be enough for you to leave? Then I was like, no. If $2,000 is enough, no. Let's go $3,000. For example, let's pick $3,000, and then I started to have a budget. I had a great coach a couple, I would say 15, 16 years ago as well. He helped me as much. What he taught me is you need to have 2 or 3 different bank accounts. One bank account was kind of like truly all of my income was going there and I was spending there. And what he taught me is make sure before you receive your paycheck, at least 20-25% goes to the investments account. And at least 15% go to the savings account. Then you're pretty much stuck with $1,500 a month to spend. Is it fun? No, it's bad. It's hard.
Yeah.
However, this is how I built in a year and a half or 2 years. I had enough money to dump it in a stock or think about real estate and so on. I feel if a lot of us, if we have one bank account, all the money goes in there and all the money is spent from that bank account. And a lot of us, it's hard to recognize how much money left in that specific month. But if we always save before we spending or invest before we go through the spending process, that's the key. I mean, it worked for me, but I think it will be a good position for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, let me share to that, because you and I had spoken about that, and one of the issues that I came to you with at the very start, and for people who don't know who you are, you're the financial guy for Keller Williams, which is a big company that makes money and has a lot of expenses, and you have a lot of money going in and out. And you and I talked about exactly what you said, which is how do I create a more profitable lifestyle where I have some money? And you said the same thing, and I've seen since we talked about that, savings accounts have grown, and I've invested and I've bought property, and I have all this money in a different account that I use for my personal life, but it keeps me in a spot where I know, like, that's not all my money. My money has already been parsed, which is nice. So I know that works, and I just want to test to that.
Yeah. Do you have any other, proofs in the pudding right there, right? I mean, with the story Scott was saying, do you have any other, obviously starting with a budget, right? Do you have any
Yes.
other, tips and tricks, or maybe some tools or something, some budgeting tools that people or you've used or work that might be helpful for people who might just be getting started and have no idea what to do?
Absolutely. I definitely can share with you guys Excel that I use. There are so many tools, obviously. I always recommend, if you have a little background in accounting or if you are familiar with QuickBooks, use QuickBooks. I don't want to advertise for QuickBooks, but it's working. I have been using QuickBooks for a long time, and I believe QuickBooks did a great job on providing different software for different needs, from the personal side to the business, from payroll and so on. And sometimes it doesn't have to be that much. I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of us, we start a project, but since the project is so complicated, we give up and we just forget about it. Like, a couple things that I always recommend, like, for the first couple of months, if you are not really comfortable, just print your bank statements. Go through your bank statement, total how much money you made in, for example, October, and how much money you spent, and see how much really you made in that specific month. And then go through your spending and see and categorize them by, for example, rent, grocery, entertainment, and so on. Sum them up. That one is the most easiest way, and I believe you don't need any specific software or tools to come up with those numbers. But if you categorize all of your expense, you immediately can tell where you spend more and where you can reduce. Beside that, there are so many softwares out there too, that, I mean, such as QuickBooks, but there are so many of them that are free. There is no charge. However, having a software, you have to be dedicated, learn, and at the same time, there are all so many videos on YouTube you always can utilize. But and then after, beside those software, Excel is the best thing. You can put all of your income and expenses there, and just go through and see how much money you can save. What I've learned, there are so many classes, such as Dave Ramsey, and I'm certified with John Maxwell as well.
Oh, okay.
I believe taking those classes and over, it will help. Especially Dave Ramsey, they did a great job on going through the whole process, having reserve for the personal and the way you're spending and so on. And I always recommend, if you take it with a couple people, they have the same mindset and they really want to change. Those habits is not easy to change. Like, all of us, we love to spend. I love to spend money. That's my favorite thing. However, what I've learned is either make more money, or you have to just kind of like play with what you have and have a strategy behind it.
Yeah.
That's
on the topic of Dave Ramsey, because I know a lot of people have asked us, and I know a lot of younger people think the same thing, like, when's the right time to invest money? Where should I invest money? In your opinion, because the Dave Ramsey way, and correct me if I'm wrong, is making sure you've built up enough savings before you even take any money to go to investments, right? Having that that emergency bank, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Where should that amount be for people, relative to their income and expenses that you've seen?
With Dave Ramsey's, what I've learned is, as soon as you build your 6-month reserve, there are so many different strategies you can do. That's one of the things that majority of, and again, everyone has different financials, different expenses, different needs. And sometimes when I think about it, since I have been auditing a lot of financials, there are not real theory that this is how you need to do that in order to achieve your goal. Like, we have a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, they didn't have much money and suddenly they got a lot of money, they hire right people, then they put them on the right track. However, me personally, I like to have, if I have on a personal side, I always recommend to have 6-month reserve and then start investing. And if you have business the same way, you have to have 6-month reserve. More than that, I don't see any reason. I believe you have to play with your money regarding what you do with your money, because if you leave your money in your savings account, you don't receive anything.
Right.
And I have people who have a couple $1 million in their savings account, and past 6-7 years and they have the same amount. But you must play with your number, with your money, and you have to make educated decision on how you're spending, why you're spending. But in my opinion, after 6 months reserved for your personal or your business, you should invest. You should do that.
Can you explain what the 6 months reserve is for somebody who might not know?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, you go through your entire bank and see how much money you spend, how much money you make. I usually focus on the main. I categorize my expenses. Usually I have fixed expense, and then there's something that happens suddenly. I usually budget the fixed expense, such as, for example, you have to have internet for your house, you have to pay rent, you have to pay taxes, and so on. And then suddenly you go out and you spend money on your tire for the car, or even entertainments, or you have birthday in a family, and so on. I would say go through every month, write those down, or kind of like project how much you're going to spend. And after you have those numbers, let's say it's $2,500, multiply it by 6 and save this one up in your bank account and never ever touch that account. That's your absolutely the time that you need that money. Go and touch that money. If you don't need it, don't touch that account. Even if you have a savings, if you have an investments opportunity, I personally don't use that account. I just let that opportunity go away. Because sometimes you use that, then eventually or immediately something changed, then you have to go back and borrow money from your credit card. That puts you back.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake, and not necessarily just in young people, but people with their personal finances in general? What's one big mistake or one big thing that you notice that people do wrong?
Yes. Two things. Student loan. A lot of that's my thing that I'm working with couple young people right now as well. They closed their eyes and they borrowed money, and now they are in a big student loan. That's the part that when you graduate, especially you graduate with a degree that you're not able to make money, and that's the part it will put a lot of young generation behind. And when I was studying music, that was the thing. It was really fun to not work and just borrow money. Then I woke up and I'm like, oh, I have that much money in debt, so I have to go back and just pay them off as much as possible, because the interest rate is high and it's really hard to keep up with the payments and will automatically put you behind. Yeah, that's number one that I see. And at the same time, credit card. A lot of banks. They encourage young generations, like young people, they always offer them. And once you max 2 or 3 credit cards, it's really hard to go back and fix those. Those two are my main.
No, and I'm curious because a lot of different people in finance will have differing opinions. Yes. What are your opinions on credit cards if used correctly?
I love that. There are a couple of strategies. Some people, they say you have to have cash in order to invest. I strongly disagree. For example, Bank of America a couple of years ago gave me a credit card, $15,000, 4%. I cash out 4%, but I played with it in the stock, and I think I gained like almost 15 or 18%. So if you know how to play with the number, and sometimes the investments, the key is you understanding the investments that you want to make. If you know the investments, and if you again go back and you make educated decision, and everything is great when you forecast or when you put everything on a piece of paper, I like that. 4% is great. Even now, if anyone come, I just refinanced my house to 0.8%. So wow, I'm totally okay because I don't want to pay too much interest to the bank. Yeah. So I always looking to save more money on interest.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen for bad behavior myself is I'm not watching my money enough. How often are you reviewing your bank statements? Is it just monthly? How often are you reviewing expenses?
Yes. Weekly basis. Something that is really interesting, me and my wife, we review our bank account every single day. And in my opinion, when you watch your bank account in every single day, first you can catch any kind of like dispute, like any other amount that we all have like $10, $15. They must someone use your credit card or something.
Yeah.
I always recommend to go to your bank every single day, and you can just do it in the morning as soon as you wake up. Just 5-10 minutes, go through your banks and really quick and see everything. However, going into details is in a weekly basis. That's how I do it. Usually Saturday or Sunday, I take like 45 minutes, go over through every financials that I have, make sure I'm on the right track. And I believe especially I use QuickBooks for all of my businesses. And the thing is, when you use those, I can catch any mistakes, or at the same time, if I'm not projecting on some amount and I already paid for it, so I can either stop it or I can come up with a plan to get it better. Make it better.
And depending on, is your guys' budget, constantly fluctuating depending on the changes that you see? How often do you guys reset your budget or kind of reevaluate and maybe increase here or decrease here? Is it all kind of like case by case basis, or how often do you really sit down and say, hey, maybe we need to change something here or change something there?
Absolutely. I do it I'm going to make an example for myself. I do that 2 times a year.
2 times a year. Okay.
October, November, I usually forecast for the next year. So I'm right now at the middle of the budget forecast for myself, and even actually for the company as well. For Keller Williams, this is how we do that. Usually on November, by end of November, I exactly know how much money I'm going to make next year and how much money I'm going to spend. June or July, I review my budget forecast, and I see if, for example, this year was really interesting year for all of us. And on March, when all the shutdown and everything happened, and I went through my entire budget, I cut a lot of things that I was projecting, because if you remember, middle of the March, all the forecasts and projections was really hard, and it was a bad time. And I immediately cut everything that I could to be able to have a better cash flow in my companies. Beside these two, on September, another thing that I really want to talk about is the taxes. Every September, I sit down with myself and I go through the first couple of months, and I go and I tax plan for myself. I project how much taxes that I have to pay. There are so many ways, if you own a business or if you don't have a business, still there are ways for you to save money. There are so many IRA account, or there are so many plans that you can utilize in order for you to pay less taxes. That's what I do as well. Besides 2 times reviewing the budget forecast, September I think about my taxes.
Gotcha.
And for somebody who has just built up that 6 months of reserves, and they only have, a couple $100 or maybe even, 1,000 or 2,000 to start that investment account, where do you recommend, or what would your advice be on where to put that money? Would it be in an IRA account? Would it be in the stock market, or someone with not a lot of money to start investing with? What would be your advice?
I always recommend to talk to professionals. There are so many tax planner, or there are so many financial advisors that they can utilize. If you bank with any of the large banks, you can call them. You can get someone on the phone. They can walk you through the whole process and so on. There are so many ways. It depends on the age. It depends on the money, and at the same time, it depends on your financial asset that you have. IRA accounts are great, and if you have a younger kid, there are so many different accounts, like such as 529 you can do, and save some money for their college and so on. And I highly recommend to talk to those financial advisors. And almost majority of the large bank, they have that. Or even if you don't have a bank account, you can call them, and someone will be on the phone with you and will explain their products. And there are so many tools available right now. There are so many books available right now, and YouTube videos. Like, there are so many things that people can utilize and understand better. I always recommend to understand your strategy first, and then understand what you want to invest on. Well, stock is really hard, yes, but if you understand a little better, understand the market, what is, how things are moving around, it will make things easier.
Do you have any? You mentioned book recommendations. Do you have any good personal finance books that you've liked or you would recommend for anybody to read?
For the finance one, especially for anyone who hasn't done much project, I highly recommend Dave Ramsey course. I mean, that one, I believe it will give you the full, everything that you need of understanding. I believe Dave Ramsey take everyone to the basics. And once you have the basics, then I usually follow the top CEOs, CFOs, or entrepreneur who kind of like constantly build their portfolios.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Man. Well, then you review every week and you check a couple times a year for your updates, and you are constantly budgeting. When it comes to a business level, how do you run a business with the finance? I know that we want to talk to you about personal finance, but if you run a company, you sound like you run this kind of similar to how you run the personal side. I mean, what difference is it once people, because a lot of people listening have businesses, you know, what's the difference with like running an operating account versus kind of your own personal operating account?
Yes, for business, I always recommend to have separate, make your personal separate compared to your business. So make sure to do that. In the past, I have a lot of friends who has one bank account and for their business personal, and they use the same bank account for everything. And sometimes it's really hard for them to switch and completely do things separately. I always recommend to establish a corporations if you are financially there, because having a corporation, it will help you to put yourself on a payroll, for example, and think about the money differently. And now it's a corporate. It's you kind of like, you have to grow the corporations and the financials. Whenever you make things separated, you truly see your business. And a lot of times I had people, they kept businesses for a long time, and 4 or 5 years later, they were like, I noticed it's my hobby, it's not my business. I have to get a job, or I have to build something else. Because they truly look at the numbers, and they've noticed like they don't make as much as they spend. And that's number one that I always recommend. Talk to your people. If you have accountant, talk to your accountant. Make sure, if you see your accountant once a year, you either have a wrong accountant or you're not doing your job. You must see your accountant 2 or 3 times or even 4 times a year, once every quarter, because there are so many things you can do to save money on your taxes. At the same time, if you are not booking your financials correctly, if you don't have a P&L balance sheet, you don't kind of like see the degree of your growth in your business, so you're not doing things good to yourself, because you eventually put yourself out of business. Definitely meet with your accountant at least 2 times a year. If you don't do it every quarter, I recommend this at least 3 or 4 times, but that's okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so you've talked and you've shared a lot of advice and tips and tricks for obviously personal finance and business finance. If there was one big takeaway that someone listening or someone watching should take, if they know nothing, don't know where to start, what would be the biggest takeaway or the biggest piece of advice that you would want to share directly with them for them to get their personal finances on track?
That's a really good question. If you're hurting in your business or your personal finance, you always can make it right. You can build it. And regardless how much money you make and how much money you spend and where you are in jobs or you are without jobs and so on, you always can help yourself. But the thing is, the first step to understanding your life, to see how much money you want to make and what kind of life you would like to have. If you expecting to spend a lot of money, so you have to either choose a job or open a corporation or a company or business that you really want to make a lot of money. I always recommend to understand your, go back to the basics and see where you want to go and put everything on a paper. Like, I believe everyone has to have a map for their life. They have to see where they want to go and where they are. If you know where you are today, it's easy to go where you want to go.
Awesome, man. Sage advice. Sage advice.
You're
If you're
awesome.
not preparing to, what is it? If you're not preparing to succeed, you're preparing to fail.
Absolutely.
Well, Aryan, for those, I know, like we've said, and we're super appreciative and grateful. We come to you with questions
I
basically
appreciate
every
you
guys.
day about our personal finance stuff.
Guys are awesome.
Where or what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they have questions? Is social media the best way? Email? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Facebook or my email, aryan@geraveshinc.com. And
Awesome.
I love to help people, specifically business owners. If you need help, if you need my help, I have a free consultations. I would love to help you.
Perfect. We're so grateful you came on. We're
My
grateful for
pleasure.
having you around us. You're
Thank
somebody who's
you.
helped us a lot. So thanks
Yeah.
so much.
I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
guys. Thank you.
Aryan, thank you.